Let's work another problem where we take some English sentences and represent them using predicate logic. So our domain is the whole world. P of x means x is a plant. I of x is an insect. S of x is x smells, and by that I mean it produces a smell or a fragrance. And E of x and y, now we have two things being used here, represents x eats y. So our sentences are: some plants smell, all insects eat plants, some plants eat all insects, and only plants smell. All right. So our first one here, some plants smell. Some, that makes me think it's not all plants smell. So I'm thinking existential quantifier. Okay. And so we're saying here that there's some things, but let me rewrite this in English. There exists a thing that is a plant and that smells. There's and, so I'll put these together, going back to what I said earlier, existential. And we're saying there's this thing that has two of these properties. It's a plant and it smells. So P of x and S of x. Right? All insects eat plants. And what's implied here is that this is also all for the plants. For all things, if it is an insect, then it eats plants. Right? For all things. Universal quantifier. But now what are we talking about here? We have for all things, if it's an insect, then it eats. Remember, I said we were implying all plants. So really we're saying all insects, which I actually did literally right here, and all plants. Because we have two different things, though, we're talking about, we need to, even though they come from the same domain, we need two different letters here. All right? So let me write it out, and then I'll come back and explain a little more. So we also have the idea here of something called scope. And that basically comes down to where are the letters represented. Because remember, x and y here are dummy variables. So if I only use x, then we're basically talking about the same thing. So if you pick something, then you're saying it's both an insect and a plant. But we're not really trying to say that, right? We're trying to say there's something that's a plant, and there's also something that's an insect, but not the same thing. So that's why I'm using two variables here. So I'm saying for all x, if that thing is an insect, and for all y, if that thing is a plant, then x eats y. That is, the particular insect eats that particular plant. And that's true for every insect and for every plant, at least for the sentence I wrote here. If I only use x, then we're claiming the same thing or the same object from the world is an insect and it's a plant, and that it eats itself. Now there might be things that eat themselves, but they're not insects and plants. Okay, so that's why I have two variables here. C, some plants eat all insects. There exists, or there exist things that are plants and if anything is an insect, then the plant eats it. This sentence seems a little convoluted, but it still makes it easier to figure out how to represent it logically. So here I said some plants. There exist things that are plants. Okay, so it's not going to be every plant. So I'm going to have an existential. And we said some plants eat all insects. So for anything that's an insect, some plant would eat it. Okay, so how do we write this? And I'm thinking my example here actually is based upon things like a Venus flytrap, which is a type of plant that actually does eat insects. This one's a little bit different, so let's go back through it again. There exist things, all right, there exist things that are plants, here's P of X, and if anything is an insect, so if anything, really for all things that are insects, here's my universal, then if it's an insect, the plant eats it. So remember X here is for the plant, so plant eats all insects. So there exists a plant or some plants that eat all insects. That's what this says. And finally D, only plants smell. For all things if it smells, then it is a plant. It's not a true statement, but we can still represent it logically. Only plants smell. So we're saying nothing else can produce a smell. So we're saying for all things, if it smells, then it's a plant. Right? For all things, if it smells, then it's a plant. Only plants smell. So why not do this instead? Which I would read as, for all things, if it's a plant, then it smells. Well, when we say only plants smell, we're not necessarily claiming that every plant smells. We're just saying that if something has a smell, it happens to be a plant. But maybe there's some plants that don't have smells. This is claiming every plant smells. This is saying that if it smells, then you can conclude it was a plant, but not the other way around. So to get better at these, and I'm not great at it either, but to get better at these, you just have to work lots of problems and also see lots of examples to see how you go about representing things.